I've sat with a lot of commissioners. I was a guest for boxing commissioners. They had an annual event here years ago, and it was like a question and answer. And one of the things that they're boxing MMA. They regulate combat sports, they call it, right? I said it would be really difficult to play football, right? If you had a touchdown that was, you could run 80 yards and it was a touchdown in New York, right? And then you had to run 100 yards in Arizona. LA or Arizona. It's like, okay, or a field goal is worth 9 points, right? It's like, oh my God. It's like, how do you adjust strategies and tactics and all of this? So that process, they were talking about the boxing commissions and combat commissions were talking about having uniformity. They call it the uniform rules, right? Yeah. Uniform. So you don't end up with somebody accidentally kneeing somebody, right? Breaking a rule because it's trained in you. Oh, yeah. You train, when you're in that facility training, you train a reaction for an elbow or a reaction for a knee or a reaction for this. And that's what it is. Back then, it was like, I don't know, what's the rules today? You're going to allow elbow? No, I'm going to do this. And that's the way it was. It had this whole flux to it where you're like, shit, what are the rules today?
And there was the language barrier. So just so you guys know, in this documentary, it shows the lead up to this fight. So Pride is in Japan. So it shows fighters from all around the world kind of talking to the commission for
rules commission,
kind of getting these updated rules from people who can barely speak English, and then these other fighters, their agents, were kind of
translating. So it would go from Japanese usually to English, and then from English it would go to Russian.
Yeah.
So it was like 3 languages to it, and then you had other languages in the room too. So there was it was a tough call.
In this scene specifically, it was just kind of like they're adding these additional rules, asking for clarification. What was it, a couple days before the event? Like it had to be leading up to this specific fight. And so they're changing the rules. You can barely understand to clarify what those rules are. And then in the fight, you're sitting there, you're taking some pretty significant blows.
Oh, yeah.
That you're probably just understanding very recently, this is illegal. So I'm going to assume...
I'm waiting for it to stop.
Yeah, you're going to assume that the referee is probably more abreast of these new rules than you are.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like, oh, it's obviously illegal, or should have been. And instead he waves it as a one.
As a fight over.
As a TKO. Yeah. And you were like, you get up and it's such a good documentary. But that had to be so mentally, psychologically defeating more than anything physical. So it shows you leaving, going out of the room, and you're keeping it together pretty well, talking about like, hey, I'm actually not good. Like, they're not, hey, how are you doing? And you're just like, I'm not good. This is not right.
Yeah.
And then you get back to the locker and you feel that emotion coming out of you.
It hits you like a ton of bricks.
Other fighters have the luxury of not having, it is a mental battle for any fighter, but those are things that I don't think ever going to have to be lived through again.
Yeah, they're, probably some of the most emotional times I've ever had in my entire life are post-fight. And, this one just happened to be filmed, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, like at the end of the Grand Prix, when I lost to Fujita, which is in the film as well, right? I'm devastated, absolutely devastated. And I'm in the locker room, and this isn't on film. It shows him like stitching up my chin at the very end, right? And my chin's all split open. And my brother's there. My brother's 12 years older than me. He's been almost everything I've ever competed in.
Matt? Is it
Michael. My older one.
Okay.
Matt's just a little bit older. My brother Michael's considerably older.
Got it.
And I'd like take off all my clothes and I just sit down in the shower. And just tears start coming down and I just start like this. It's just a different type of emotional, like
involuntary convulsion.
Oh my God, man. You just no control over it. And I look up with one eye, and my brother he takes off, gets in the shower, sits down next to me, and we just both sat there crying. And it's this emotional feeling, and it's undescribable, because a lot of times the lead up to the fight and then the emotional dump afterward is just this incredible, feeling. It's really difficult to describe, but it's literally like this build up for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. You win or lose.
Yeah.
You still have this little emotional dump afterward. A little bit of the high, right? Like, I won it. And then, because now you're looking for the next target. Like, what's next? Yeah. Right? And so,
what sucks is I can't even imagine that. You're probably trying to describe color to a blind person.
Yeah.
I want to know what that feels like, but right? I really can't even comprehend.
Yeah.
So I apologize.
It's part of the reason why people get attached to the sport, because they get a little bit of that, right? They root for their favorite fighter, and you knock somebody out, they stand up in the living room and they shout, "Oh my God!" It's that feeling.
Vicariously living.
Yeah, they get that little bit of jazz, right? That little bit of juice, and as a promoter and a entrepreneur and owner, and you probably feel you close a big deal. You do. There's
an emotion there, but I don't want to ever.
It's a little juice, but you get the idea of like juice times 10x.
Yeah.
It really does have a component to it that is undescribable.